Alright, hey everybody, and welcome to the Tierlist update. I know it has been some time, but now we're finally on patch 9.03, and I want to give you my insights about the patch, about my current tier lists, mastermind options, and legion spells, what my ideas are, and yeah, let's just talk about. As usually, I have prepared a tier list, link in the video description to my master sheet. And I'm just going to talk about the most impactful changes in my eyes. So let's get started. Starting with the unit tier list, I think the very first thing I should mention is the new unit in the S tier, which is Phoenix. And I felt like Phoenix was already really strong last patch. But according to changes and more experience I have with the patch, it feels like Phoenix is just so strong as a unit. It even is strong in ways where you are not having like the perfect typing for a Phoenix. For example, 12 would be the wave that comes into my mind here. A Phoenix can be very strong on 12, and it's all about the positioning. So, as you might know, the Phoenix does have this shield where it takes reduced damage, as long as it has shield, which is based on mana. And if you can place your Phoenix accordingly, that it's taking damage, so the shield is getting reduced, it will increase the attack damage of the Phoenix, and this way you will have a very strong power merc shredding the wave because of the additional damage, and it takes reduced damage. So overall, very well rounded if you can position it perfectly, and this is why Phoenix now is S tier for me, because it is a high skill gap unit, but it can be really strong. One unit that moved down from S though is the Gate. And here's why. With the worker change on the new patch, we do have a lot of changes towards either bigger sense or to games end a lot earlier. And what made Gate so strong is that as you are somewhere around on value, your Gates can summon up units and you will have more value than you actually do have. But if the Sen is too large for you, you stand no chance with the Gate because it's not able to just release enough units to make it useful. And this is exactly the problem now. So either the game is going to end too early and you do not have the Gate and the support line around it, or what happens mainly is that your value is just not big enough for the Sen size, and that way the Gates cannot unleash the full potential. They can be still very strong against medium-sized Sens. Second unit, moving down from S to A tier, is the Halo. We can see it here, as you know, only the first and the last three are sorted, so Gates Halo just somewhere in between A. Same happens here, right? Bigger Sens, faster waves. A Halo wants a slow wave, smaller Sens, because the longer the wave takes to clear the other units, the longer the Halo can ramp up, and this way you have a very efficient unit. But once again, waves are getting faster due to bigger Sens and stuff like this, so the Halo getting just a little bit less efficient. We have some changes down here at the bottom as well. First of all, I moved Harpy a bit up, and I still think Harpy is quite a bad unit. Like, I played it a few times, I have decent win rate with it actually, because somehow I managed to win with it from time to time, but overall the Harpy is just not as strong as it should be. Especially in the early game, it can lack potential if you have to open with it. If you find a very good opener where you play around it, where you build like a tank for example, and then somehow just have the right curve to get into a Sky Queen, I think it can be a very good early and mid game unit. And I could even see it move a bit up because the Harpy overall is an early and mid game unit, and as I just mentioned before, the patch is a lot more about mid and early game. So this is why Harpy going up a little bit. Even the flower is going up a bit, because the flower nowadays, once again, it's just a bit strong in the early game. You have a lot of viable flower openers. First 4 waves, for example, flower can be very strong, then you have to care on 5 a bit. But you do have this aggressive push on the first 4 waves, and if you manage to build a flower correctly, especially with Aquas, this is like the best option to go for, or go for cash out and a 20 cost 1. You can go for a 6 worker flower in this case. You have a quite strong push, and you have the first 4 waves quite easy, so you could already start on wave 4 to build for 5, etc. This is why Flower now moving a bit up, because there is just more potential in the early game now, since the early game overall is a lot more valuable than it has been a patch before. Changes though, in the D tier, we had Flower and Harpy move up, but there's one unit I feel like I had to move down, even though the Pyro got buffed, and this is the Bazooka. Pyro just is the bad version of the Flower overall, because the Flower deals magic damage. Sorry, not magic damage, but the part of the Flower damage is percentual damage, which makes it also not completely useless in mid and late game. And you do on top have the Flower being a melee unit, so it's a lot easier to make it share aggro. Those are two reasons, for example, why I think Flower is just better than Pyro. On top, Bazooka, you have the second upgrade to Zeus, and Zeus actually is really bad at the moment. It's like probably the worst magic damage dealing unit, even though it's only like 50% magic damage. Obviously, it's not a good opener anymore, because you just do have too many weak waves. The synergies are very limited, like the best synergy still is the one with Daphne's, which can be very strong from time to time. And yeah, that's my reasoning why I have the Bazooka down there. The Berserker still just feels a little bit too weak. I think if it gets more HP, it actually might jump into B tier directly, but at the moment it just feels so bad, so too often, and that's why, for me at least, it's a D tier. Maybe you could argue to put it in a C tier. Apart from this, overall I think the builds stay pretty much the same. We had only a few changes in the tier list overall, like for example, one more buff would be Tempest, and as you might know from last tier list, the Tempest is only in A tier mainly because you have all those synergies with the Halo, with the Masks and Phoenix, etc. The synergy is a bit reduced now with the Halo kind of dropping from the popularity. Maybe Halo would move even to B tier in the existence of the patch. I mean, it's still very fresh for me. I played it like 3 or 4 days now, so there's still potential for some changes, but due to the buff I will just leave it here. I think apart from this, the tier list is pretty much accurate. I could imagine the Priestess moving up a bit, because Priestess is just a very strong mid and early game unit, especially paired with units like a Mask. They both share the same range, so you can split perfectly with those two units. I would like to further have a look at the patch. This is my current tier list. Remember, it's just the start of the patch. This is how it feels at the moment. I'm pretty much sure, as I said, Priestess might gain popularity, Halo might move a bit down, and Berserker, depending on some changes to come, it has potential to move up as well a bit. I think last unit I want to mention here and I want to discuss is the Boar. It moved one more down for me. It just feels like Boar is not as great anymore, especially with Sense on 17 already being able to crush the Boar, since before you had the Boar as a damage dealer on 17, plus you have this massive meat shield. But the problem is the Sense usually on 17 now are large enough to even be able to counter this hardcore meat shield, which makes overall 17 a lot stronger, and this way Boar a lot weaker. Exactly. So this is my thoughts on the unit so far. Let's head over to the Mastermind options. Okay, Mastermind options. I think the main part about the new patch, I think I mentioned it often enough already, is this worker change. And with the worker change, you overall have the game length shortened a lot. I mean, the usual game in high elo before ended like 17, 18, 19, 20, somewhere in that range. And now I would argue it is somewhere ending between like 12 and 15, 16. So the range dropped a lot. What does this say about the Mastermind options? First of all, we see Greed is obviously still consistent. It's just overall the best performing spell in my eyes, if you consider all high elo players. Somehow, even though I loved Greed the last seasons, I'm not that great with Greed this season, I can't say. But it is still a very good performing and probably the best performing spell. Second, we have Cartel. And Cartel was quite bad before, because you had those long waves and this minus income on 10 did hit you quite hard. But this time, since the game's tend to end a lot earlier, and the early game matters a lot more, because if you gain a worker lead in the early game, those workers will produce more Mythium now with the worker changes. You just have Cartel being a lot stronger, because the reasoning behind Cartel is you take the sacrifice of losing some income on wave 10, but therefore you usually gain a work advantage above the other Mastermind options. At least that's the general idea, and this is just what perfectly fits the current meta. This is what perfectly fits the current playstyle you should go for. This is why Cartel is, in my eyes, now S or tier 1 at the moment. Second is Cash Out. I think it is pretty much consistent. It has somehow this early game component, because you get this extra money in the early game to push consistently 5 or 6 workers with their openers. It even allows you, for example, to go for an Avenger, and an Avenger Butcher opener can very hard push as well. So Cash Out here, for me, definitely up, just for the named reasons. Redraw and YOLO. So my pick on tier number 3, Redraw and YOLO, are the picks you could go for. That might not be perfect, but in my eyes seem to be somewhat neutral, somewhat balanced. I think Redraw is still a very strong option. I just feel like it's more of an identity thing. Like, either you like to play Redraw because you have a few roles you feel familiar with, or you need to cover your teammate. And YOLO is more of a fun thing. Still, I would not like to play it in the ranked. And I really have to say, even if I play with high elo players, I always feel bad if they pick YOLO, because you just have this chance of ruining your mate's game. So please, maybe play YOLO more in 4v4 instead of ranked, because your teammate will thank you for it. But overall, I think due to the 7 income, you have this early game advantage in theory, and therefore it is balanced, neutral in the current state of the game. Next ones are Lock-in. It's just overall too bad, because you only have the choice of 1 unit, while Redraw you could at least get synergies. Chaos. I always argue that Chaos is not as bad and nobody's playing it because it's like meta thing, even though it might be viable. But at the moment, due to the fact that games end earlier, you don't play for this one late game combo anymore, and you're a lot more flexible, because mid game combos are there, but in theory, in mid game, you could play any combo to be strong. And this makes Chaos a lot weaker, because in Chaos you try to like hit those late game units consistently, while this is not the case anymore, and therefore Chaos dropping 1 rank. Next on, we have Castle. I think this is just a perfect counterpart to Greed, to Cartel, right? Last we had Castle up on 1 and Cartel on 4. Now the swap, because you just play a lot more mid game now, and this income bonus will be granted a lot less, because the game is just gonna end earlier. Last but not least, the Fiesta. Fiesta was bad before, Fiesta got changed now, and I think Fiesta is still very bad, because how you now make Fiesta efficient is actually not leaking on 1 anymore, because you roughly get a bonus of 10 gold, which is not really great if you have no income therefore. But the actual best spots to league are somewhere in the middle now. Let's say waves 8 to wave 11 maybe. If you league small on those waves, you get a fairly large amount of gold, but you do not lose too much if you really pro league. But it's a lot harder to league on those waves consistently than it would be to league on the first few waves, so it's a lot higher skill gap. The overall gold is not great enough, and I just do not think you should play it in ranked, especially trying to league on purpose can really backfire you and your teammates. So in my eyes, it should even be removed from the ranked pool. Alright, that's the thoughts on the Mastermind options for me. Let me know your opinion in the comments. I know there's a lot of people hating on Fiesta already. I share those opinions, but I would like what you think about the other spells. And while we're at this, you can also check out my Discord. The link is in the description, to have further discussions about balancing, give me video ideas, or just chat around, help others to look at their builds, help you. Feel free to join the Discord. That thing, we want to have a look at is the Legion spells. And in Legion spell tier list, I didn't change too much yet. There's a few changes once again towards the worker. First of all, we have the Lizard Army. I think I mentioned it the 20th time now. Mid-game is a lot more impactful, right? Waves 11, 12, and 13 are just a lot more pressurous. You have a lot more to send, and therefore the Lizard Army, for example, 12 into Big Reason on 13 can be quite strong, and the Lizard Army is just the perfect spell for it. It's the perfect offensive spell for it. This is why Lizard Army is up there. One thing I'm not quite sure yet is Battle Scars, because Battle Scars is somewhat the same like investment, and investment dropped for me 1 tier, because of the same reasons like we had with Castle. But the thing about Battle Scars is that it at least grants you some HP, which can be very impactful on mid-game units. Example, you have a Haven on 11. You get Battle Scars on the Haven on 12, and the Haven is probably more of a mid-game than a late-game unit. It's quite strong on 12, 14, very good in 17, so those Battle Scars be granted that early in the round can be quite impactful. Same with the Battle Scars on this area. So I still feel a little bit unsure about Battle Scars. Maybe it's more towards A than it is S at the moment, but those changes can be made later on. Divine Blessing now, obviously very strong, right? You do have those 2,400, I think it is, HP, and the 18% attack speed. So this is a banger unit in the mid game where you really need this impact. So Divine Blessing even being better at this time, you would probably, if you would sort those spells, you would probably hit rank 2 at the moment. I would feel like, I just mentioned before, investment dropping a bit, because it's just same as Castle, not that strong anymore. And I think apart from this, the balance didn't really change a lot, right? You do have Magician, even though it got buffed, I feel like it's just not the best option still, because especially if you pick Magician on the unit on wave 10, you still do have this problem that usually you will need a lot more waves to come, like let's say wave 14, 15, till you filled the circle with units that can use the mana, and this is already like the outer or upper range of games ending at the moment. So I think Legion spells too much didn't change. I think the most impactful one are Divine Blessing now being a very banger spell, same as Lizard Army, and maybe the Battle Scars moving a bit down. Obviously, investment as well being a lot weaker now. I think the Giant Snails, for me still in B position. It could be happening that I move them up to A soon, because those extra HP on the snails, just this extra power you can send, can be a lot more impactful if the send size grows on top. Because usually, depending on the wave, I think wave 20 is the only wave where this rule doesn't apply, but usually the pressure of a send is not growing linearly, but exponentially, and if you then have some extra powered snails on top of bigger sends, then usually you will have a very strong break on your opponent. Alright, these are my thoughts on Legion spells, Mastermind options, and units this patch. Leave me your opinions in the comment or in the Discord. Feel free to share with everyone else, and yeah, thanks for watching. Bye bye.